Hello and welcome to the Simracing Corner. At $499 for 15 Newton meters of peak torque, on paper the CAMMUS direct drive wheelbase entices sim racers with the best price to power ratio of any direct drive wheelbase you can buy right now. It's a seriously attractive price and that deserves serious attention, and this certainly has caught my attention. So how does a $499 direct drive wheelbase perform? Well, we'll get into that in due course when we hit the track later in the video for the testing segment. I have lots of interesting things to show you, so make sure you stick around for that. But first, I'll give you a quick tour around the wheelbase. The CAMMUS DD is a large unit and quite heavy at 11.6 kilograms. Of course, you'll need to add a wheel on top of that, so that does increase the weight a little as well. The enclosure is aluminium. All round, it's very solid. You'll notice the side mounting bracket I have attached. That is a separate accessory you can buy from CAMMUS. A unique feature to the CAMMUS, and making good use of what would have been unused space, we get some buttons, dials and a couple of switches. The power button is also located on the front face. The buttons light up when pressed. The rear panel, as you would expect, is where everything plugs into. CAMMUS also makes a pedal set, sequential shifter and handbrake, which is why we have some additional labelled sockets for those. There's also an e-stop accessory you can buy, that's optional. That's just a big button for quickly disabling the wheelbase if the force feedback gets out of hand. It's up to you if you think you need that, which is why it is a separate accessory and not included with the wheelbase. Also, take note of the grille. On the other side of that, there is a fan for airflow circulation to keep things running cool. Let's swing it around to the front again and take a look at that quick release. The CAMMUS quick release is proprietary. A lot of quick releases look like this, but they are not necessarily interchangeable. So something to remember, as it can be easy to make that mistake. CAMMUS does sell individual wheel side adapters, so it's not a problem, they do have you covered. But you have options, so let's go over those quickly. Firstly, the simplest one being is buying your CAMMUS wheelbase with a CAMMUS wheel and button plate, and you're up and running from the get-go out of the box. That makes a lot of sense, as the button plate communicates through the slip ring connection. You can see the terminals on the end of the steering column. The second option is running a completely different quick release. The standard 70mm bolt pattern means you can attach any quick release system to the wheelbase. The wire can easily be disconnected and pushed into the hole where it comes out from the steering column. That just keeps it out of the way when you add your own quick release. Another quick look at the CAMMUS button plates before we move on. I have replaced the rim with my own. It does come with this red stitched leather 330mm rim. I just wanted something a bit smaller, so that's why I swapped it out. The CAMMUS button plate is very functional. The enclosure is aluminium with a carbon fibre face and magnetic shifter paddles. The buttons on the plate also light up like the ones on the wheelbase. To mount the CAMMUS wheelbase, we have 4 threaded holes underneath. Those are M6, that's one option. The second option is side mounting. These channels, one on either side, except standard T-slot nuts, ideal for attaching the wheelbase to aluminium profile. As I mentioned earlier, I'm using the CAMMUS mounting bracket, and this slides along this channel. I have published a full video on the mounting bracket, as there is another piece to the bracket for base mounting. There is a link in the description if you want to find out more about this. Check out that video, as there is more to this accessory than I'm showing you here. The bracket is very useful, so I would recommend it. And finally, this is the power brick that comes with the CAMMUS. A powerful direct drive motor requires a lot of power to run it. This PSU is rated at 480 watts. Normally the next part of the review would be jumping into the Simrig for the testing and evaluation segment. But before that, I do want to show you something first. A viewer of the channel DM'd me and sent me some teardown pictures of his CAMMUS, and I figured you might want to see this too. There is a bit more to this story. He experienced a catastrophic failure with his wheelbase, hence we get these pictures. It failed, so he took it apart. Take a close look, you can see some questionable soldering and wiring. Do know that this is an early version of the wheelbase. CAMMUS has made revisions since then, though you can expect the general layout to be very similar, but hopefully tidier. I don't have a plan to strip down my wheelbase to compare everything here, but I was curious to see if mine also had some dodgy soldering, so I took off the back plate for a casual inspection. It's a busy looking board, but it looks okay. However, I did discover something that did disturb me. This metal piece is a heat spreader, and that covers some important components. However, that heat spreader is not making contact with the chips underneath, and this has potential for something really bad. To cut a long story short, I replaced the thermal paste with thermal pads, and this seems to have corrected the flaw in my unit. I'm sure you want to find out more details on this, and I have made a couple of separate videos that go into full details. Links in the description to those, so that's the reason for this brief account, so do check those out. This is the CAMMUS app. You'll need that for operating the wheelbase and updating the firmware. There's not much to show here. It's fairly light on settings. It covers the basics. These are my settings that I've been running, so you might want to use those as well. What I discovered is to extract the most detail from the force feedback is to set the power below 100% in the CAMMUS app and adjust the force feedback strength in the game. That goes against my usual formula of 100% in the driver software and then running lower force feedback strength in any game. With the CAMMUS, I found the opposite worked best for me, but you'll find out for yourself. You just need to experiment with this sort of stuff and you'll work it out. There's also an iOS and Android app you can install for adjusting the wheelbase settings. This communicates with the wheelbase over Bluetooth, so yes, it does have onboard Bluetooth on the wheelbase. You don't need to have a separate dongle, which is kind of good. As the CAMMUS app settings are basic, personally I found no need to bother with this app. Nevertheless, this is an added feature you may find useful. And now we can get onto the track for the testing and evaluation. Okay, the first thing to talk about is compatibility. For my testing, I always run a wheelbase through a bunch of racing titles. Initially, I did find a hitch with Dirt Rally 2.0. It is compatible, but I did need to copy and paste a line into a configuration file within the game folder to get force feedback to work. After that, it was perfectly fine. I have made a quick video guide on that if you do need it. A link in the description, you'll find it there. Beyond that brief distraction, the CAMMUS did not stumble with any other title. If you want some certainty about any other games not shown here, I would recommend you join the CAMMUS Discord and just ask there. The big selling point of the CAMMUS DD is of course that 15 Nm of peak torque for less money than competing products. And I can say for sure it is powerful, more power than anyone really needs. It's plenty powerful for me too. These are the benefits of a high torque direct drive motor. Firstly, you won't be maxing out its capability. That's better for the lifespan of the hardware. It won't be straining and that avoids force feedback clipping. Secondly, that extra power gives you leeway. You can adjust that force feedback strength accordingly to the racing game, possibly the car you're driving as well, and very importantly, the physical wheel you have attached. Larger, heavier wheels make the motor work harder, reducing the felt force feedback strength, and that freedom to pump more power through the force feedback allows the wheelbase motor to push past these considerations. The CAMMUS and its 15 Nm gives you those benefits. I would also expect a powerful direct drive wheelbase to transmit not just strong elements, but also fine detailed effects in equal measure of effectiveness. Automobilista 2 is right up there as one of my favourite sim titles, partly because of the excellent force feedback effects, being extremely vibrant, packed with detail. The physical properties of each vehicle feels different through the force feedback. You really feel connected with the car and its capabilities and limits through that force feedback. And you need a direct drive wheelbase to get all those dynamic sensations, and that's why these high-end wheelbases exist. My first impression of the force feedback from the CAMMUS is there's plenty of grunt coming from the significant effects. Leaning into corners, strong progressive weight transfer, bumps and undulations from the track, curbs and collisions. There's range and depth to those strong effects as the motor is strong. So that's a good start. A few boxes get ticked there, and there's no notchiness from the motor, so that's another positive too. However, there is something I noticed immediately in this game and all the others I tested, is fine detailed force feedback effects are somewhat limited, somewhat muted here. The CAMMUS isn't producing fine detailed effects as well compared to my other direct drive wheelbases that I own. I don't like using artificial friction and damping. These are settings you can find in the driver software of any direct drive wheelbase, so I'm not using any of that here, but the sensation from the force feedback is like there is some level of damping baked into the CAMMUS. It's unavoidable, and I don't like that. And when you add damping, the wheel rotation becomes a bit sluggish, and when I rotate the wheel, I'm getting a bit of that too. Another result of damping is the softening of force feedback detail, and that can wash out lighter nuanced effects. There will be some people that like that. There is an argument to say it feels more realistic when the suspension and tyres are absorbing sharp bumps from the track. However, damping is indiscriminate, it's going to affect everything, so delicate sensations will take a knock too. I would like it to be an option I can add if I need it, rather than it being forced upon me as a feature of the wheelbase. I like detailed force feedback effects, and the CAMMUS is underperforming in this respect because of that damping and lower force feedback detail. I don't know for sure if it's a limitation of the physical hardware or if it's a driver or firmware feature. I don't really know, guys, but I can tell you it's there 100% of the time in every game. AMS2 and its rich palette of effects does make a decent stab at pushing those effects through that layer of damping to some degree, and it does feel pretty good, to be fair, with the CAMMUS. I didn't have a bad time here, so don't get me wrong, it's decent enough, but still down from what I would expect. So let's move on to a title that does take a hit from this, ACC. This is a game where its force feedback effects are built with more subtle elements. It's a title that ditches over the top canned effects and aims squarely at realism. This is a problem for the CAMMUS as it doesn't transmit the important delicate sensations from this game. Assetto Corsa Competizione feels very bland as a result. With my other direct drive wheelbases, the force feedback is more informative, interesting, and quite frankly, more engaging and enjoyable. With the CAMMUS, it's pretty miserable, to be fair. Because of this deficiency, the results will vary from game to game. All driving games do their force feedback differently. No pun intended, but I have to say it, guys, your mileage will vary. Now on to R-Factor 2. Like Automobilista 2, this is another game that sends out a rich variety of effects, lots of detail, and the CAMMUS is doing okay here. I'm having a decent run. Again, the force feedback is able to partially get past that layer of vagueness from that damping, but I'm still always aware it's lacking and not on the same page compared to my other direct drive wheelbases. Some racing games or some racing disciplines, it's not going to matter so much. Sometimes it's more about, getting nice power from that force feedback, and sometimes it's about getting more detail. It depends what the game force feedback is putting out. So yes, sometimes the CAMMUS is going to be good, sometimes it's going to feel bland. It's not an all-rounder. That's the problem I'm having with it, really, guys. And that's what you can expect, a sort of Jekyll and Hyde experience. That's how I would describe it. You may be wondering why I'm banging on so much about force feedback detail. Does it matter? Well, yes it does. It can for sim racing. There are massive advantages. The undertone nuances a continuous rhythm of dynamic sensitive weight changes through the effects and feeling this through the wheel. This enhances your understanding of the grip and you become more in tune with finding the limits and not going beyond them. The CAMMUS has no problem keeping you busy and engaged with its raw power, medium and strong effects. That's all covered. It's all good stuff, and I do like that. But once you peel that away, it struggles with the really detailed stuff, and that is its weakness. Okay, it's $499. Can I really complain? Fair enough, the price tag is somewhat a reflection of the ability of the CAMMUS. Yet my CSL DD and the Moser R9, they're comparably priced to the CAMMUS that outperform the CAMMUS force feedback detail. Yes, the CAMMUS is substantially more powerful. That has advantages in its own right, and a fact that hasn't escaped me. But the quality of the force feedback fidelity can be disappointing, and that is a big deal for me. And then if we take a look at the build quality and the basic software, It's cheap for a reason, right? This is the least refined direct drive wheelbase I've used. It's rough around the edges compared to the competition. I think that's a fair assessment. That's very attractive price and high torque. It looks really good at first glance. I get it, it's very appealing, but it does come with some caveats, and that's something you will need to accept as a CAMMUS owner. Because I'm fortunate enough to have other wheelbases at my disposal, that has helped me make this review. And I promise you, I have spent a lot of time on this study. I was hot swapping between my other wheelbases, running the same cars and tracks, the same titles, to get a true measure of the capability of the CAMMUS. I've invested more time with the CAMMUS review than I have with any other product review on my channel. It's important to get this stuff right. Let me say this, the CAMMUS performance is not terrible. I had some fun with it despite it not being as good as I'd hoped. I like the power, but at times not so much that limited fidelity. Do understand my review is formed from my experience using competing products and my expectation of using said competing products. If you can look past that headline feature of 15 Newton meters, there are more refined force feedback options out there that are also professionally finished to a much higher standard, for about the same amount of money. So it's a trade-off. Do you want more power or more detail? Those are your choices. If you want both, be prepared to spend more. It is what it is. It's also worth saying $499 buys you the wheelbase. You still need to add a wheel and also shipping on top. The wheelbase, a CAMMUS wheel plus shipping, puts it at around $850. That initial bargain price is no longer as easy to swallow. Obviously, do check out other reviews, read comments from users and maybe forums, Reddit, anything like that. And I highly recommend you join the CAMMUS Discord. Do your research on this one before buying, okay? Get a good bead on it, that's my advice. So you have my take on the CAMMUS direct drive wheelbase, and I hope that contribution helps with your research. Okay, that's it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. So until next time, happy simming and bye bye.